She thought everything had worked out well. The affair had been committed and her husband knew nothing. But she was wrong. Her husband found out and decided to take revenge, and then the wife regretted what she had done. Watch the story of how the husband made his cheating wife very sorry. It all started when my friend Viktor invited me to a wedding one day. He had been dating Katya, his girlfriend, for quite some time, and they kind of decided to get married. It was a mutual decision. He was already 34 years old, and she was 27. I'll admit right away that I didn't really like this Katya. The education of some tourist on the specialty has not worked a day in his life, and Viktor was already married, and I think from 19 years, if not lie, worked in some nonsense company for the production of weather booklets or magazines. She had recently given up smoking. To make a long story short, I called her a complete package, except that a child was missing. But she did not have children, at least known to me and Viktor. And in this very wedding, as I realized, here's the interesting thing, he and she were both not too interested in what he and what she were. And if the quiet attitude to the wedding from my friend, I could explain by the fact that he is a man, but not a strong interest in Catherine, I was much more stressed, but kind of decided to legitimize what is called their relationship and still got married. She continued to work, he too. And gradually it began to turn out that Katya is very friendly. I would say even too friendly. She had a lot of friends on the social network, and all weekend she had a fitness class, or psychological courses, or stretching practice, concerts, travel, and a million other things. In short, Catherine is very social, but there is just one unresolved issue in this sense. No way she cannot make friends with Viktor's mother. Well, with his mother-in-law, that is. I know Nadezhda Konstantinovna very well, and I can tell you that Viktor's mother has better sense of people than Sterlitz. And by the way, whether it is confirmed or not, you can decide yourself when you have listened to my story up to the end. Anyway, about 1 year passes, and once again Vitek calls me. How are you? What are your plans for today? How does the beer smell? I have not forgotten. This call a year or two ago would not have surprised me in any way. But for the last 12 months, it seems to me that Viktor has become different. He worked more, rested less, and practically stopped drinking. And then he calls me and directly asks me to meet him for a mug today. I then mentally decided that he had something wrong and would like to have a drink with someone, but to discuss it all. And that's how it turned out. We met him at my garage and decided not to go anywhere. We put some music on in the car and sat with him inside. We sat and talked, and Vidya started to complain. And the complaints, of course, were about his wife. You know, it seems to me that I do not possess Katya as a wife. She cooks, cleans, and at night is also all right. But somehow I don't feel like she's my man. I'm always on the lookout for her. Well, she, at least as I feel, as if only for herself. And most importantly, that I in this situation, in general, and nothing to show her. Everything that should in principle do the wife, she does 100%. But the feeling that she is mine, I still do not. We sat with him for a while longer, and then we decided to go to a bar after all. We called a cab and purposely drove to the other end of our town. It was already evening outside, and no one really wanted Viktor to go home. So we took a whiskey with him. And that's when the story went into detail. She's very sociable, you know. Anyway, the other night, I was on a business trip to the other side of town. I went into a restaurant to get some coffee and run to the bathroom, and my wife was sitting at the table, and there was some guy with her. I walked up to them without a second thought. She wasn't embarrassed at all. We said hello. She said something to the guy, and I took her away. Then she told me it was a colleague of hers, and they had something urgent to deliver there, and so after work they met him in a cafe. Of course, I did not see anything criminal there, but as they say, the residue remained. We did not talk about this situation, but then about a week goes by, and I began to notice that she blocks her phone as soon as I appear somewhere on the horizon. For example, I walk into the room, I hear the sound of her phone locking. Out of the shower, that sound again. I thought I was being paranoid. No. She purposely went in and out of the kitchen several times where she was, and all the times she blocked the phone as soon as I got close to her. I asked her to give me her phone, so she, without even asking why or for what reason, began to pet me like a cat, tried to change the subject, and when she realized that she had failed, tried to lecture me about personal space and upbringing. And after that, it was as if I could see all of her manipulations. I even wondered to myself at the time how I had not seen how cunning she was before. Anyway, of course I can guess that she seems to have someone. But whether or not it's true and what they have, I don't know exactly yet. On the other hand, why would she hide her phone? Anyway, we talked to him for a long time, and as I realized, Viktor's main problem was that his Katya was not, as it were, caught and not a thief. But to live in this state, of course, was unpleasant for him. He was depressed and excited somehow at the same time. He began to follow her sometimes. She even kind of exposed him once. But like he said, again, even in this case they didn't fight. Katya was a real manipulator and never had open conflicts. And Viktor, also because of this, became even more nervous. He set himself a goal that he would find out exactly what was what. And this thought, and this suspended state of course, greatly spoiled his life for several months. Anyway, one evening I received a phone call from an unknown number. And a dry male voice told me the name and surname of Viktor, and then clarified for me as known to this man. Just an hour ago, in the area where his wife worked and where he twice met her with his colleague after hours, Viktor was hit by a car, and with no end in sight. He left his car in the driveway for some reason. I think so his wife wouldn't see his car. Came here on foot and crossed the road somewhere. The voice reported scrolling through the last calls on his phone. There was Katya, some unrecorded numbers, and here was my number. Katya didn't answer the call from his number, so they ended up calling me. Now it's been a few months since all this happened. We occasionally see each other, mostly at Viktor's mother's, but I don't communicate with this Katya anymore. She knows how I feel about her, and she probably guesses that I know why Viktor went there and why he was there. And at the end of my story, I want to add some information for reflection. After these events, Catherine began almost every day to go to her blood and beg her to give her the opportunity to help her in everything she wanted. Started to carry her money even from her meager salary. Not a trace of her former social activism was left. And at the same time, she wanted to leave our city at any cost. And now, looking at how much guilt she feels, I realize that Viktor was right in his suspicions. An innocent search for pictures on an old black and white camera led to big problems for his wife. He never would have thought that attention to detail and film features would reveal his wife's worst-kept secret. It turned out that the adultery had been so carefully concealed that only an old camera could uncover this dark secret. Watch this story to find out how the wife regretted her actions when her husband avenged her betrayal. I decided to tell you a story about my first, now ex-wife, and how I originally figured out her infidelity. This story happened to me in the very early 2000s, and now, remembering it, I even chuckle. Although at the time I was not, to put it mildly, to laugh. I was already 30 years old at the time, and I, like many others, was trying to do business at the time. Things were going with varying success, but thanks to older and more experienced colleagues, I still managed to earn something. I go into such details in the beginning for a reason, because there was no stability in business, and especially in the early 2000s, and we had no experience of this very business. We had to work with our brains as hard as we could, and, accordingly, it was necessary to drink as little alcohol as possible. I mean, technically speaking, I was quite an enviable groom, had an education, had my own business, did not drink much, worked hard. In general, I quickly found someone who wanted to marry me. I met Natalia in a circle of mutual acquaintances. She was a few years younger than me, blonde, of medium height, with expressive green eyes and a pretty good tongue. We started dating, and 6 months later, we decided to get married. Back then, I still thought that the sooner it all happens, the healthier the future children will be. And this is Natalia, though still yesterday's student, and nothing in her profession or in life is not able to. But she is beautiful and healthy, and most importantly, I like it. And I really thought at that moment that the rest will sort of stick, and soon it did. We got married and started living at my place. My business wasn't going fast. The population, though not quickly, but it was getting a little more money, and therefore our friend's store began to bring in more income. My wife stayed at home. It went on like that for a couple of months, and then I started hearing things from her, like I also need a business. I also want to be self-fulfilling, and so on. You'd better find a job to your liking, and I'll take care of the big business, I told her then. But my wife's ambition did not let her take a regular job. She sat at home and wanted a business. And then one evening she told me, I talked to a friend, and he also offered me to open a common point of sale of flowers with him. I liked the idea. What do you think? There is a lot of money in flowers. Natasha, but this is a separate whole business. It's an investment. The more so flowers are a special kind of work, and so on. You can't just open a shop and become a millionaire. We talked to her about this not excessive hope, and it turned out that this very acquaintance of hers is Murat. He's my young wife's ex-boyfriend. They had studied together at this institute, and according to her, once upon a time there as if they had met. Of course, at first my wife assured me that he was chasing her there, but of course she wasn't involved and was so impregnable. But later she confessed that she and he still met for a couple of months. And I think that maybe even longer, and not just a couple of months. That's where I forgot about the flower store. I'm young, but at the time I did not believe in fairy tales. And it turned out that not for nothing. Former partners in a relationship after a divorce or the breakup of a relationship just do not communicate. Usually, they can't even see each other or treat each other in some neutral way. Anyway, whatever it is, they certainly don't offer each other to go into business on the fly. That's it. Well, in general, that evening Natalia and I had our first serious showdown. If this case took place now, you could have forced her to show me his cell phone or his sotsateti finally. But then again, in the early 2000s, of all the means of communication was only a home phone. In short, I had nothing to check. We had a little fight with her and talk about business she no longer conducted with me. But the fact remained. She was in touch with her ex-boyfriend. Let's remember. A few weeks of sitting at home, and from the fruitless search for a job to her liking, my wife began to lose her temper a little. That on any occasion, or even without one. Whether long or short, my wife and her mother decided to go to the Krasnodar region, a little rest. I cannot just take all of a sudden and go on a road trip. I answered my wife after hearing her offer to keep them company. There was silence in our apartment. If I wasn't going, they probably weren't going either. It's not so great with money. Well, in general, I as a battle lazy then offered them to go without me, and I would give them a kickback. My wife got excited. We even talked on the phone with my mother-in-law. And to her credit, she refused to take my money and went on vacation solely on his own. In general, we agreed that I would only pay for the rest of his wife. She packed up. The whole house immediately became like a big market or a train station. There were all kinds of slippers, bathing suits, and suitcases lying around for about a week. Well, it's like you're going for life, I told her then, and in a way that's my foresight come true. One of the final chords before she left was our camera. Of course I'm taking it, my wife told me. I took it, got the case from it, and remembered that there was no film in it, and there was a train tomorrow, and they had to leave. Well, should I stop by and buy you this film, or will you go yourself? I said to my wife at that moment, and it was the fact that she went to buy it herself that decided our fate. I left on business again, and my wife went to get the film. The next day, she complains to me that the film is quite expensive. I asked her where she bought the film, and she told me that it was in a store nearby. Well, there were different styles of film. I would have brought a cheaper and all, but no, the seller told me the other is no longer there. The arrival will be a few days, and I will be gone tomorrow. In short, okay, I escorted these two travelers to the station for a summons and prepared to live a week as a bachelor. Days went by, we spent evenings and Zlecko calls with my wife. I heard a lot of gratitude to me, plus almost every call my wife pointed out to me that I was just an exemplary husband, caring and hardworking. And all the funnier, by the way, at the end of my story would be what she would tell me about being married a little later. Long story short, the travelers were back in their hometown. Sunburn, lots of local souvenirs, sea salt in bags and all that. There were pictures left behind. Bragging about their pictures, I asked my wife, and she promised me tomorrow, or at most, the day after tomorrow, to organize them all for me. I come home the next day, and our whole kitchen table is strewn with pictures. If you remember, they come in 10 by 15, and then there was a format twice as big. My wife and I flipped through them, and I was thrilled with them too. The pictures really came out very bright. Perhaps the good light had an effect on the photos of Krasnodar region, where we can't have any problems with sunshine. But it turned out that the secret of good photos is not only in the sun, but also in the film. What kind of film? I asked my wife, and of course she didn't tell me. How do I know now? My wife told me what kind of film they gave me and what was in stock, so I bought it. In general, after finding out from her address, I decided a day later to go and buy the same one. I did not know what to take, so I took my wife's developed film and photos just in case. Hello, maybe you can take an experienced look at what kind of film these pics were made with. I have the film right here and these varied pictures right here. The guy in the film department took my film and flipped through the pictures, saying that some of it was made with an expensive high-sensitivity film and that he didn't know the rest. Then he pointed his finger at a rather expensive film in the window. All the pictures were taken on the same film, I told him. I picked out the film and was about to pay for it, when I realized that for that price, there were only 12 shots. I asked him right away, and he said that they didn't carry more frames for that sensitivity. It was quite expensive. Ordinary people rarely buy films with that sensitivity, so they only carried 12 frames in this particular film. I looked at my hand where the pictures were, and I realized that there were more than 12 frames. I counted it, and it was right. There were 30 of them. I could see why the tape had cost my wife almost half of her last paycheck. I was on my way home with the pictures. Where should I put the tape? I asked my wife. In the living room closet by the TV. I opened the cabinet, and there was another one just like it. And here, right here, of course, I was praising myself for this insight. I put down the 12-frame developed film that I was carrying into the store, and then I took the other film out of the cabinet, which was also 12 frames. 12 plus 12 is 24, and I had 30 pictures in my hands. Now who would pay attention to this nonsense? Almost no one, and in general, and I myself would not pay attention, but the last conversation between my wife and her ex-married I have not forgotten. The residue, as they say, remained, so I took the 2 photo tapes in my hands and went to the bathroom with them. After turning on the light in there, I took each film individually and arranged each photo under each frame. In some films, as you may remember, if it's conventionally said 12 frames, you can take 13 and sometimes 14 pictures there. But even with that in mind, there's no way to get 30 out of 2 12-frame films. To make a long story short, on these 2 films, I only got 25 pictures out of 30, 12 on one, 13 on the other. Where did the other 5 come from in my hands? It's a mystery. Since they were of exactly the same quality as the others, I concluded that it was the same film. But where was it? I came out of the restroom, put all these films and pictures in the same closet and started guessing. But I didn't have to guess for long. I waited until my wife had gone to wash in the evening and pulled her suitcase out of the closet. Rummaging through the inside pockets, I pulled out the third tape. And of course, it was the same as the ones now in the closet. I looked at it in the light and found there the same 5 pictures that I had been looking for. But unfortunately, it didn't end there. All the other frames did not please me. In them, I saw someone who looked like Natalia somewhere in the room, as well as a guy I didn't know in the room. The next day, I ran to the store and developed all these shots. In the candid photos, I encountered this Murat, Natasha in the room, and the edge of a wine bottle. From their position and some other details, let me not list them. I realized that their relationship was, to put it mildly, no way off. I returned home half an hour later and tossed these pics to my wife. I'll skip her cheap excuses. I'll just say that those pictures and her cheating with the photo were enough for me at the time. She went on her way. Now let me remind you that about halfway through the story, I said we would have fun reminiscing about her praise of me as a husband at the end. Anyway, the cherry on the cake was that a few months into our divorce, Natasha and I met in the yard. And then I heard from her that by the time we were married, she, of course, wanted a husband with stability and prosperity, but at the same time, she also wanted adventures. Well, as a matter of fact, she got it. Now there is no work, no missing man, and adventures with Murat ended with living at home with my mother.